They laughed at the villain. They always do. They pointed their fingers. They whispered behind his back. They made him the punchline of their story. Because it's easy, isn't it? It's easy to laugh at the one who doesn't belong. It's easy to mock the one who refuses to play by their rules. It's easy to pretend that the outcast will stay in the shadows forever. But laughter is cheap, and mockery is fragile. Because the same laugh that makes a man stumble today can become the sound he uses tomorrow to sharpen his teeth. They thought he was harmless. They thought his silence meant surrender. They thought their numbers, their armies, their approval were enough to drown him out. But here's the irony. The villain doesn't need their approval. He doesn't beg for their applause. He doesn't crave their permission. Because villains aren't fueled by praise. They're fueled by rejection. Villains aren't forged in the spotlight. They're forged in the fire no one dares stand in. And fire doesn't care who laughs at it. Fire doesn't stop because someone mocks the flame. Fire only asks one question: what's left when the burning is done? They laughed at the villain, but their laughter was only kindling. Every joke, every sneer, every smug smirk was just more fuel for the inferno he was becoming. And the part they never understood is this: while heroes rise in celebration, villains rise in silence. While heroes are crowned with cheers, villains are crowned with scars. And scars are more permanent than applause. So laugh while you can. Mock while it's safe. Because the one they ridicule today is already becoming the one who will end the story tomorrow. Villains aren't born with scars on their faces. They aren't born with madness in their eyes. They aren't born with chaos in their veins. They're made, shaped, forged. Every villain is the echo of betrayal. Every villain is the sum of 1,000 broken promises. Every villain is what happens when pain lingers too long and silence becomes too heavy. You see, heroes are crowned in applause. Villains are carved out of rejection. Heroes are chosen by the crowd. Villains are abandoned by it. And in that abandonment, something dangerous grows. Because when the world tells you you don't belong, when they slam the door in your face, when they laugh at your attempts and spit on your name, you learn a truth the heroes will never know, that you don't need anyone to hand you power. You build it yourself. Alone. In the dark. In silence. They mocked the scars, thinking they were proof of weakness. But scars don't mean defeat. Scars mean survival. Scars mean you endured what would have killed them. And every insult, every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every reminder that you were less than, it was fuel. It was iron thrown into the furnace. It was stone stacked onto the foundation. It was blood, sweat, and madness poured into the making of someone they will one day regret underestimating. Pain was not the ending. It was the prologue, the introduction, the first whisper of the storm that would one day drown them. Every humiliation was a paragraph. Every betrayal was a chapter. And the villain kept writing, kept growing, kept turning pain into power, until finally, the story no longer belonged to the so-called hero. It belonged to the one they mocked, the one they laughed at, the one who took every rejection and built himself into the ending they could never control. Laughter is a weapon. But like every weapon, it loses its edge when it's overused. At first, their laughter stung. It pierced the skin. It echoed in the dark. But then, the villain stopped flinching. The laughter became background noise. Static. Empty. And when the villain no longer hears it, when he no longer reacts, that's when the fear begins. Because now the mockery has no power. Now the silence speaks louder than the jeers. And now the villain is free. The hero basks in the spotlight. The villain moves in the dark. While the hero tells his story to the crowd, the villain writes his story in silence. While the hero gathers applause, the villain gathers strength. The world doesn't notice the villain's rise. They're too busy laughing, but shadows grow thicker when ignored. And by the time they turn around, the villain is everywhere. The mocked man in the corner, he's now the architect of the ending. And every laugh they threw at him becomes fuel for his fire. People laugh at the Joker because they think chaos is funny. They mock the madness, thinking unpredictability is weakness. But here's the truth, the one they don't want to face. The punchline doesn't belong to the crowd. The punchline belongs to the clown. Every jeer, every insult, every laugh thrown his way was never the end. It was just setup. And the setup always leads to the one thing no one can change, the final act. And who writes the final act? Not the hero, not the crowd, not the mockers. The villain. They wanted you broken. They wanted you desperate. They wanted you begging for a role in their story. But you didn't beg. You rewrote. They thought the villain was a side character. They thought he was disposable. But the villain was patient. He waited. He endured. And in the end, the story belonged to him. Because the villain doesn't ask how the story starts. He decides how it ends. There's a silence more deafening than any roar. It isn't the silence of peace. It isn't the silence of rest. It's the silence that comes after the crowd runs out of laughter. At first, they mocked you with confidence. Their voices were loud. Their jokes were sharp. Their laughter echoed through every hallway. But now, those same voices hesitate. Those same jokes don't land. And that same laughter dies in their throats. Why? Because they realize something terrifying. They realize their words no longer pierce you. They realize their laughter no longer shakes you. They realize their entire arsenal of ridicule is empty. And when laughter dies, fear takes its place. Because if mocking you doesn't work anymore, then nothing does. If laughing at you doesn't break you, then you are already unstoppable. Look at their faces. The same ones that once grinned at your pain. Now they look over their shoulders. Now they whisper instead of shout. Now they question whether you're listening. And here's the truth they choke on. You don't even care. Their silence doesn't come because you silenced them. It comes because they silenced themselves. They finally understand the game has changed. You're not the victim. You're not the target. You're not the clown for their entertainment anymore. You are the writer. You are the director. You are the one holding the pen to their ending. And while they were wasting their voices on laughter, you were building an empire out of silence. While they were mocking, you were planning. While they were laughing, you were sharpening. And now the only sound left is the sound of their regret, the sound of their fear, the sound of their laughter collapsing under the weight of your rise. That's when the villain becomes something more. Not the joke, not the outcast, but the inevitable. And inevitability doesn't need an audience. They mocked the villain, but mocking was never victory. It was just delay. Because now the villain has the pen. The villain has the stage. The villain has the ending. And in the story's last line, there will be no laughter, no applause, no hero's triumph, only the smirk of the one they underestimated, only the silence of those who doubted, and only the truth that in the end, the villain always writes the final chapter.